A riveting thriller about a fugitive in search of a quick payday in Mexico City who finds himself in the crosshairs of a dangerous international scheme is Take No Names by Daniel Nia. In the novel, we meet Victor Lee, who's living under an alias in Seattle. He accepts a job offer from Mark Knox, who says he's running a logistics company, but is really breaking into storage facilities to steal valuable items. During one such burglary, Lee finds a puzzle box out of which drops a red stone that looks like an uncut ruby. Lee soon figures it's the world's rarest gem, which Chinese extraction firms have been illegally mining in Myanmar, and that makes unloading the jewel complicated, and Lee and Knox have become enmeshed in a Chinese scheme to launder money and evade US sanctions. Take No Names by Daniel Nia is being published by Eco Books, and it's a twisty, action-packed thriller with a compelling plot that will keep you guessing. So add this book to your TBR. It's a summer thriller you really don't want to miss. Welcome to The Reader's Couch, a podcast that brings you lively conversations with some of your favourite authors and bookish personalities. Over here, the couch is always booked, but I've moved some books to the side table and fluffed some cushions so I can welcome a guest or two to come lounge with us. Today on the couch, we have Emmeline Duncan, the author of A Ground Rules mystery series. Book 1 in the Cozy Mystery series is entitled Fresh Brewed Murder, but she's here to talk to me about her latest novel and the second book in the series, Double Shot Death. Stay tuned. A historical fiction novel to add to your reading list that's based on the little-known story of America's first nursing school is The Nurse's Secret by Amanda Skinador. Set in 1880s New York, we meet Una, a young female grifter who's evading the police. Soon, she finds herself conning her way into Bellevue Hospital's training school for nurses. Because of her life on the streets, it has prepared her for the horrors of injury and disease found on the wards. And just as she's finding her footing, a set of murders continues to follow her as she tries to leave the gritty streets of the city behind. And soon, she'll have to choose between self-preservation and exposing her identity in order to save others. The Nurse's Secret brings to light the grisly realities of 19th century medicine, the story of Bellevue Hospital and its training school through the eyes of an intriguing and dynamic heroine. The Nurse's Secret by Amanda Skinador is being published by Kensington Books, and it's a historical fiction novel you really don't want to miss. Hi readers, welcome again to The Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is Emmeline Duncan, the author of A Ground Rules mystery series. So book 1 in the series is entitled Fresh Brewed Murder, but she's here to talk to me about her latest novel and the second book in the series, Double Shot Death. Please welcome to the couch, Emmeline Duncan. Hey, Emmeline.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here. Loved having you participate in the Epigraph Literary Festival. Loved meeting your cat and dog as well. And if you missed that, readers, you can head on over to YouTube where you can watch the video there from the festival. But I'm super excited to dive deeper in the book. And now that the book's available, Emmeline, how are you feeling? How excited are you?
I'm very excited. Although one interesting thing about being a writer is that, we write the book, we finish it, and probably look at it maybe a year right before it comes out. And so it's really interesting when I do like a book event and people ask me questions about like what decisions I made, like writing a book, like why did you decide like this specific thing? I sometimes have to stop and think wait, what was I thinking? Because, a lot of times we've already written another book. I'd already written book 3 of my series before book 2 came out. And so I sometimes have to stop and remind myself, like, oh yeah, what were the characters doing in that book? Like, where were they in their lives? I would say I am just very excited, and I love, hearing feedback from readers, and it's always amazing to find out people have read my book or are excited to read it.
Yay, absolutely, absolutely. So I want readers to hear from you. Tell us about your novel, Double Shot Death, and what can readers expect when they pick up this book?
Well, the series as a whole is about a coffee roaster and a coffee cart in Portland, Oregon. And in book 2, Double Shot Death, Sage Kaplan, my main character, has taken her coffee cart on the road to a local music festival. And of course, death follows. It's a cozy mystery. Sage is the first one up every morning as the coffee cart vendor. So of course she's the one that stumbles across the dead body of a local music manager, dead, holding one of her coffee cups. And of course, she's going to solve the mystery.
Right, absolutely. Well, I want us to get into the characters a little. Like you mentioned, Sage, she's a co-owner of Coffee Cart. They're on the road, they're here at this music festival. But for the first time, she's also going with her boyfriend, who is a video game developer. And while there, they run into a singer called Maya, who is with this group. So I want us to focus on those 3 characters first, but let's share with readers more about Sage, who she is, what she's all about, what her coffee company is all about, because there's also an interesting story there. So let's start with Sage, and then we'll get to her boyfriend.
Well, so Sage's mother is a very notorious grifter. I like to tell people, if you've seen the TV show Leverage, Sage's mother is like an evil Sophie Devereaux. And that's given Sage a lot of guilt, even though, her mother's actions are not her own. And you'll see that reflected, because one character, not of those 3, you'll meet in the books, is like Sage's brother, who a lot of his life is actually reacting to some of the same elements of their childhood. And he's a child advocacy attorney. Sage has gone a different way. She, started her coffee cart, which she does try to think of ways to make her business socially conscious. So at their cart that's stationed in Portland, they have a suspended coffee board, which is based off of a real life program out of Italy, where you can pre-buy coffee or maybe like a sandwich or some kind of food for someone that's down on their luck. And doing those sorts of things are a really big deal to Sage. Yeah, and her coffee cart would fit into like the 3rd wave Portland coffee cart.
And so let's get into her boyfriend now, Bax. He's a video game developer. He's going along with Sage to this festival where they run into Maya. And Bax has worked with Maya doing music as well. Then there's the band that's performing at the show that Maya has some beef with the manager about because she hasn't been paid royalties for the songs she's written. So tell us a bit about Maya, what's going on in her life, and the relationship with Bax and how they met.
Well, Maya is a very excellent musician. She, has like a master's degree, in music, and she's incredibly knowledgeable. She has like an encyclopedic knowledge of music. She's a very good writer, and she's very passionate. And she had been with the band, the Changelings, and they are just on the cusp of making it big with their new lead singer. And in the band, like her and there was kind of a co-lead singer, and it wasn't working as a group. And so they decided Maya should leave, but that, they would still use a lot of the songs that Maya had written or co-written with Nate, the lead singer. But then, of course, that causes a huge problem for Maya later when she's not getting royalties for songs that are getting picked up in a movie and getting national radio play and a lot of internet downloads. And meanwhile, so Maya always has a lot of kind of side jobs in addition to trying to make it as the singer in a band. And one thing that she's done is she's scored music for Bax's video game company. And with her background playing multiple instruments and having a little bit of nerdy interest of loving video games and being a big reader, scoring a video game is something she really loved. And Bax likes her because she's incredibly reliable and brings, a lot to the table. And that can make Sage a little bit, Bax and Sage's relationship it's solid, they're together, but it's still on the new side. And so she's seeing some different sides of her boyfriend during the festival that put her a little bit out of comfort. And then you add in, she also found a dead body. So she's not having the most emotionally happy festival, although she puts on a good show and continues to do a very good job running her coffee cart.
Right, absolutely. So there are quite a few characters in this particular book. Again, there's the main character, Sage, her boyfriend, Bax, there's Maya, There's the Changelings frontman, Nate. There's the manager who ends up dead, Ian. And there are a host of other characters in the book. Who would you say is your favorite character? And you can't say Sage, but who's your favorite character to write, or just who's a character you loved or maybe related to the most?
Well, I love writing her brother, Jackson. He's a decade older than Sage. He's technically her half-brother. And he's always sarcastic and he comes off a little bit grumpy, but he has a really good heart. I mean, he went to law school. He had options. He chose to go into child advocacy, which isn't the most lucrative legal field, but it's something that he believes in. And I kind of just, I have fun. He always gives good advice that Sage may or may not listen to, and they always have each other's back, even though, her brother might be a little grumpy. I think I joke at one point in the book that he has like RBF, which I call resting brother face instead of the usual B, just because like he always has that little bit of an attitude.
Right. Okay, awesome. So I'm really curious, what inspired you to write this novel, Double Shot Death? But also, what inspired you to start this series, A Ground Ruled Mystery?
Well, for the series, so I live in Portland, Oregon, and we have a lot of food cart pods, and that's a little bit unique compared to some cities. And the fun thing about the pods is they're basically a lot of times old city lots that were, not being used. And so the owners of the land would like rent out spots for food carts, and they might add like a fire pit, covered seating, things that bring people out year round. And these food carts are pretty amazing. They tend to be, small business owners, people that are doing what they love. And like, for example, one of my favorite pods in Portland, the Mercado, it's actually all carts from Central and South America. So you can go and get, Colombian food, made by a family like from Colombia. There was a really good Haitian cart for a while, and I think she actually opened a full restaurant, which made me very happy. And, and then other pods, for a while there was like a really good Czech food cart that did really great sandwiches. And so it has this very unique feel when you go into a pod, and it's like its own community within the city. And for a few years ago, there used to be a food cart pod right down the street from my house, and there was a coffee cart, Ole Latte. They're still in Portland, they moved downtown. And it was I had a black lab then, and it was his favorite place to go. And whenever we got within like a block of the food carts, he would start barking. And because he loved the coffee cart, because they gave him a dog treat every time we showed up. And as I got to know that coffee cart and the food cart, some of the food cart owners, like I saw that sense of a community, which you see in cozy mysteries in small towns. And I'm like, oh, how much fun would it be to write a murder mystery or a novel in general set in a food cart pod with its own unique culture? And that's where I got the inspiration for the first novel in the Ground Rule series. And then for the second book, I wanted a big part of the series for me is showing the Portland that I know and love. And I had a couple ideas for book 2. And actually the guy who he recently left the business, but I went to for years, get my hair cut, was like, you should set it at a place like Pickathon, which is this eco music festival near Portland. If that's kind of like a peak Portland festival. And I'm like, that would be a really good idea because, again, you have kind of a smaller community with people that are very passionate about what they do. And so it created an interesting environment to explore and then to look at, so here's this environment with its own set of norms. And then someone dies. And how does that affect the norm of that community? And how can I explore it in a way that'd be very interesting to readers? And at the same time, it felt very Portland. I was able to play with a lot of fun things that have meaning to me.
Right. Absolutely. And that's awesome. I love that there's this real world story behind it and that you're trying to kind of set your books in Portland and all the things that you kind of love about the city. So that's awesome. Okay, so I want to get into your writing life a little. How long did it take to write Double Shot Death, just this particular book, start to finish? And if you don't mind sharing, what was your publishing journey like for the series?
Double Shot Death was a very strange book for me to write because the pandemic had started. And I hadn't realized until it started like how much a big part of my writing process is going to a local coffee shop and kind of ignoring the world and just focusing. And so that was definitely a change for me. And also, and this will tie into my publishing journey, it was also the first book that I've ever written on contract. Like for me, a previous book had been already written before an editor acquired it. And so for the journey for that, so when originally my agent and I, like, it was kind of funny. I signed with my agent for a different book that didn't sell. And I sent him what was the first half of what would eventually be Fresh Brood Murder. And he didn't like it. And he had really good feedback for why. And I realized he was right. And I threw away like 30,000 words and started over. And then wrote what was the first draft of what turned into be Fresh Brood Murder. And I sent it to him, and he liked it a lot more. He still had some quibbles. And again, he was right. And so I did some more edits. And then we had a version of it that we both liked. And we did what's called sending it out on submission, which is when your agent sends the manuscript to a list of editors. And it was really great. We got an offer from Kensington, and we got a second offer as well. And after some negotiation, we signed with Kensington, which I was very happy about. I was very happy to work with them. And then so we did some edits with my editor, and then that went out. And basically right after I finished with him, like we signed the contract and everything, is when the pandemic hit. Once Fresh Brood Murder was done, one thing I did for my editor was I wrote a synopsis of what the second book in the series would be, so Double Shot Death. And I used to be slightly more of a pantser. I've always been kind of a hybrid between pantser and plotter. But for Double Shot Death, because I wrote the synopsis, which was like 4 pages, I was writing from more of an outline than usual, and the pandemic. So it was a very strange book for me to write, but I think it turned out very well.
Yep, I love the books so far in the series, book 1 and book 2. Really love book 2 for sure. I love the festival element. That was really fun. And I remember you mentioning earlier that book 3 is practically done. Tell us about book 3. If there's anything that you can share at this time, I would love to hear it. And is it going to be a 3-book series, or are there going to be more books?
Well, there will be at least 3. Hopefully there will be more, but that is a conversation that'll happen later with my agent and my editor. And, for most writers, like, obviously if we write like a series, we want to write as many as possible, but there's a lot of business reasons that go into the publishing side. And so at this moment, I don't know if there will be a book 4, but I have my fingers crossed because I have some fantastic ideas. Book 3 will be called Flat White Fatality. If you've ever visited like Australia, New Zealand, flat whites are a big deal. And there's even an argument over who, first created it, New Zealand or Australia. And that's a little bit of a hint also of who the victim might be. And in Flat White, instead of being, at a festival, for book 3, we're gone back and we're based in the roastery and the video game development next door that Sage's boyfriend runs.
Okay. I like it though. Flat White Murder. So I'll definitely keep an eye out for that one. But yeah, I'm really excited that we'll be having book 3.
Yeah, and that will come out in next spring. So that's exciting.
Okay, spring 2023. Awesome. Okay, Emmeline, I want to get into your reading life because even though I know we're here to talk about Double Shot Death, we want to know what you're reading. I want to know. I know my listeners want to know. So share with us the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Well, I think one really important thing if you want to be a writer is that you really need to read, and you need to read extensively. I read a lot, of mysteries, but I also try to branch out. And some of the books that I've loved recently includes Amongst Our Weapons, which is the 9th book in the Rivers of London series by Ben Aronovich. And that series is sort of like if you took a police procedural and added magic. And so it's in London and it's in England, and like one thing that I really love, because, if you hear that and be like, Rivers of London, why is that the name? Well, all of the gods of London have their own goddess. And it's one thing that's fun, and it makes sense in the books, is I believe it was a Nigerian immigrant to the UK who ended up becoming the goddess of the River Thames. And it's her daughters that are, the goddesses of all the local rivers. And the book the series has a lot of very fun, quirky things like that, with some traditional Celtic mythology, but a broader view as well. I also read The League of Gentlewomen Witches recently, which is the follow-up to The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels, which is a really fun series. You kind of have to put a little bit, turn off the logic in your brain, because it's one you just want to sit down and enjoy the ride and the jokes, and that is just a very funny series. Also recently, I've been reading some of the paranormal romantic rom-coms that have come out. I really liked Not the Witch You Wed by April Asher. Oh, and I also picked up, I was just on a road trip and a book tour, and I picked up Murder on the Menu by Fiona Leitch. She's an English writer who wrote a book set in Cornwall. And I visited Cornwall in October 2019. And so it seemed like a really fun way to go back and visit a country that is away from where I live.
Oh, I love it. I love it. The fact you went, you visited, and now, this book is kind of transporting you back there. So I think that's really awesome. That's so cool.
It's one of the fun things about reading is, you get to explore lives that aren't your own, but it's also fun to read books that are set in places by people who really know the area, because you do get that sense of what other parts of the world are like. Like Cornwall is a very special place. And so it was fun reading, a mystery set by someone that grew up there that brought in some like little, small cultural elements that you might not pick up. Like I know one thing that cracked me up. I knew ahead of time when I visited Cornwall is that sometimes people will greet you like as my lover, and so like someone hands you a coffee and they're like, here you go, my lover. And, and as an American, like I would call very few people, meaning one person, my lover. So, but it's a fun element that, you wouldn't realize if you hadn't read about it or visited.
Right. Absolutely. It definitely helps when you can get those authentic experiences, both in person and on the page. So, yeah, that's super cool. And what books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead?
One book I'm really looking forward to is the third book in Luke Arnold's series that starts with The Last Mile in Sunder City. The third book is One Foot in the Fade. This is a fun series to me because it takes like a very traditional noir, like pretty dark and like, there's not going to be a happy ending, but then puts it into a fantasy world that used to have magic. But basically, like if you think of magic as like a water tap, the tap of magic was broken in the world. And so it's someone who's a PI that's only helping people that used to have magic that no longer have it. I'm also looking forward to a middle grade novel, Sir Fig Newton and the Science of Persistence, which is about a young girl whose cat is suddenly sick. And her parents are struggling at the moment. And she figures out that her cat has diabetes and her parents can't afford the treatment. And so she has to figure out how to raise money to treat her cat so they don't have to find a new family for the kitty.
Oh, yes, that one sounds good. I love middle grade novels. I don't get those recommendations often, but I'm going to actually take that one down. So, in addition to loving books and authors and just everything literary, we love our local bookstores. I think indies are so important and they're vital members of our communities. So I ask all the guests on the show. So of course, I'm going to ask you to share with our listeners some of your favorite local bookstores.
Well, I feel very lucky because Oregon has a lot of fantastic indie stores. I, of course, live near Powell's, but one of my all-time favorite bookstores in Portland is Annie Bloom's Books. They're a great bookstore in what's called the Multnomah Village neighborhood. And they're very supportive of local writers, and they have a wonderful selection. I also love Beach Books out in Seaside, Oregon. They're a bookstore in a small coastal town. Again, a very curated selection. I love walking in and seeing what they have out because they always have some really unique things. I also love Bob's Beach Books, which is also on the Oregon coast in Lincoln City. I actually grew up next to their first location, which is like a used and rare bookstore. And so, as a kid, I went there all the time. And when I was in college, when I went home to visit family, I even bought some of my books for school in their bookstore. And then they started Bob's Beach Books, which has a lot more commercial fiction and it's new and used. And again, it's one of those stores that you can just browse through and always find all kinds of unique and interesting books that I wouldn't have necessarily found if I was only looking online.
Right. Absolutely. I just think booksellers are invaluable. I also love all libraries and librarians as well. So just two great communities that we should always support. And again, thank you so much for sharing those bookstores with us.
I was also lucky because I just went on a little book tour where I did some book events and I also visited some national parks. And I had some really fantastic events, including at the Poison Pen, a mystery bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, Mysterious Galaxy in San Diego, which I could have spent my entire day just looking at books in their store because they had a lot of interesting books face out. Town Center Books near San Francisco in Pleasanton was another. That was one of the most impressive events I've ever done because they made coffee drinks from my book for attendees.
Oh, I love it. See, they're so special. You gotta love your indies. I mean, who else is going to do that?
Yeah, to pay attention to what like the books they're bringing in and like, let's do something fun and, and unique. And it was really great because, to watch people like actually making the, some of the drinks for my book was really fun.
Oh, that's amazing. Love to hear it. All right, so getting back to Double Shot Death, I mean, I know you've done your job as the writer, you've written the book, you've given it to us, but what are you hoping for in an ideal world, I guess you could say? What are you hoping readers might think or feel after turning the last page of your novel?
Well, I hope when a reader puts down Double Shot Death that they're a little bit sad to leave the world of Sage and her friends, and that they'll want to go and pick up the next book in the series. I think especially with cozy mysteries, because they are a series, the characters start to feel like friends. And so when you read a series, it's like revisiting someone you haven't talked to for a while. And it's a place that you really wish you could go and visit. Like one thing people will tell me when they read my books is then they makes them crave coffee. And that really makes me smile, right? That they read it and they're like, oh, you affect them, emotionally and maybe make them hungry in some books. And I really like that people do have an emotional connection to what they read, even though it's just, intended to be a fun story that gets you out of your own world for a little bit and to just, because I write for people my goal when I write is for people to enjoy the stories. Like I don't necessarily try to write for a higher purpose, although I do work in things that are important to me. And so I hope when if they come home and I could watch Netflix for an hour or I could read this book, hopefully, they pick up my book and some others, maybe similar cozy mysteries just because it's more fun than sometimes streaming TV.
Absolutely, absolutely. I hope it provides readers a great escape. Emmeline, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to The Reader's Couch. You can find out more about the show and submit your questions for our guest by visiting our website, thereaderscouch.com. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Couch Is Booked. If you like the show, please subscribe, share, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Next week, I'll be back with new guests, more books, and some fun games we can play. But until then, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.